Welcome. I'm John Pifer, inviting you to sit back and listen about the latest developments with another junior exploration company that has some good news, believe me. The company, Mawson Resources Limited, is headed by the President and Chief Executive Officer, Michael Hudson, who's here with me again. Michael?
John, thank you.
Welcome back to Canada.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Michael, looking at what Mawson has been up to, especially in the last couple of years, let's start with something that investors are always conscious of. 2 years ago when we first met, Mawson was at about 40 cents. It went over $2 toward the end of 2006. This must augur well. You're doing something right.
Thank you, John. Well, certainly, it's certainly not just ourselves in Mawson. I think the market has just continued to grow. The uranium market, where Mawson is now placed, is a growing market. In fact, everyone's very well aware of where the uranium price has gone from 3 or 4 years ago, from $6 a pound to over $70 now a pound.
Well, let me interrupt for a second, because with uranium, I remember when we've talked before about projects that you had in Sweden, but now you're in 2 other European countries.
Indeed, I mean that's the other part. You expand into a good market, and you hope the market acknowledges that, and thankfully the market has started to recognise our story. So now we're in 3 uranium countries, 3 uranium prospective countries, I should say, in Europe, in the backyard of the largest per capita users of uranium in the world, the nuclear power centres of the world. So it makes sense for us to be there. It's all geographically close, all very low-risk sovereign risk countries. And so it's a good place to be.
Well, you say sovereign risk. The political stability is important. So you've got Sweden, Finland, and a project now in Spain as well.
Indeed. The Spanish acquisition is the newest acquisition that the story, we need to get out there and tell the story. We've just announced our first project only in the last few days. It's a project called the Don Benito project. It's an old mine, produced uranium back up until 1990, was a mine from the 1960s. There are resources still in the ground there. We do not have our hands on those resources yet. The resources are tied up in a state reserve. The Spanish government puts reserves over key assets, their key assets back in the 70s and 80s. The current policy is to remove or lift those reserves. So we are now just dealing with the authorities with respect to that resource area. However, we've got 35 kilometres immediately along strike. There's been over 40 projects found on the ground along that 35 kilometres that is in our in application, 100% by Mawson now. So it's a very exciting project, and we're still going to continue to develop and bring new projects to the table in the Iberian Peninsula.
One of the interesting things, too, about nuclear energy is there's a different mindset, it seems to me, for people in Europe and for people in North America. And I think that mindset comes from the fact that nuclear energy is being used a lot more in Europe.
Sure. As I said, we are in the backyard of the highest per capita users in the world. So there is a certain acknowledgement that the politics of uranium is an emotional one, and we certainly see that in Europe still. But for example, Sweden has nearly 50% of its power comes from nuclear power sources. Wow. About 80% of the population have repeatedly responded in surveys over the last 5 years that their future is nuclear. The politics has been a little slow, and that's just started to catch up. There's been a new government there in September, which now has stated that the 1980 referendum to close the nuclear power plants is not actually that doesn't exist anymore, and they're going to continue with their current situation.
And with this constant concern and attention to climate change and fossil fuels, nuclear energy and the use of this uranium for energy is a heck of a lot cleaner than anything from fossil fuels, from oil.
Indeed, signatories to the Kyoto Protocol to reduce greenhouse gas emissions struggle without embracing nuclear. That it's the only baseload energy form that can really going forward that we have technologically today available to us. So Sweden's doing very well. 50% nuclear and a large proportion hydro, and really they don't have to rely too much on those carbon-bearing forms of energy.
And in Spain, where Mawson is now taking some exploratory steps, it's almost a quarter of the energy produced is nuclear
from 8 power plants.
Yeah. I mean, this is quite a story over there, and I know that you have visited the Sweden sites and also the new one in Spain. For investors, because a lot of people who watch these programs are investors all over the world because it's accessible on the web, and they've seen Mawson go 40 cents, $1, $1.50, $2, and with more of these acquisitions and expansion. What news to them of what's on your plan, if you will, for the next 2 years?
Well, I should say not only have I just visited Scandinavia and Spain, I've lived there and been a part of that area for the last 6 or 7 years. So that gave us an opportunity in those countries to really be the early movers. So we've been able to take advantage in terms of gaining access to the better projects at the start of the cycle, before this cycle even started. To the point where we've got a lot of projects in Mawson. We manage a lot of projects. We're a technical company run by technical people. I'm a geologist with 17 years experience worldwide. I was managing a larger budget 10 years ago, really, in the majors. So it's all within our comfort zone, but we must create a clear picture to the investor. We are a uranium company. We have gold and base metal assets. We need to look at how we're going to create value in those assets under the uranium umbrella or outside of it. So that's something we're looking at. We're still expanding on the Iberian Peninsula. You'll see more news come out from there. But clearly, Mawson is a uranium company in 3 European countries, and we will continue to expand in that way through discovery and through acquisition.
Back to the properties for a moment. You say it's within your comfort zone. Some critics say you're overextended. But it's something that you're just pacing and expanding and growing, and you seem to be on top of it.
Yeah, there's certainly no problems. Really, you need money to explore, to drill. People. We've been fortunate. We've got a very, very good technical team in Mawson that's been in place for quite a number of years now. So the shortages that are experienced out there in the industry are not as acutely felt by ourselves. We certainly we've got troubles getting assay turnaround and drill rigs, but we've had those relationships established for a long time. So it's a little easier for us to operate in that respect. And the projects themselves, you need a large bank of projects at the earliest level. As long as you don't spend 1 cent more on a project that you think will never become a mine, then that's a point to stop on that project and move on to another. And that's exploration, risk management. The more projects that you're managing effectively is the way to be successful in this business.
That having been said, an investor, a potential investor, wants to see that the money they're putting in, that the company is putting in more money into their projects.
It's all about growth once again via discovery, which creates the real value, and acquiring the right properties at that right level. And properties are very hard to come by at the moment. We're fortunate to have a good supply of properties and good technical people who are still generating them via acquisition or via discovery at the earlier level. So we are growing the company. We'll continue to do that, and that's what the investor wants to see: more uranium in the ground.
Mawson Resources making quite a name for itself in Europe and quite a name for itself on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Michael Hudson is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Mawson. Delighted to have you back in the country. Always good to see you.
Thank you, John.
All right. Good continued luck. Keep us posted.
Will do.
All right. And we'll keep you posted here at Mining Interactive of what Mawson is doing, the results they get from any drilling, any exploratory work in all of their projects. I'm John Pifer, thanking you for taking the time to join us here today. Do it again.